Hello and welcome, Duck fans, where and whenever you're watching or listening.
We were fortunate to kind of grow up under the tutelage of some pretty nasty, ornery veteran linemen.
All that and more on this upcoming Once a Duck episode.
Where's your favorite place to take college game day? And I say every time, Eugene, Oregon.
That's right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Once a Duck podcast. I am Sam Schmidt, of course, here once again with former Duck, Nick Cody. Nick, how are you doing this week?
Hey man, I'm probably doing a lot better than the Ducks might be in practice and film sessions this week, but we're going to talk about that here pretty soon. I know we always want to start it off on a positive note. So with that positive note, I want to thank all our Once a Duck fans for really coming and showing us love in our first episode. We've hit 500 views, and I appreciate each and every single one of them.
When you got to give it up to Duck fans, whether it was showing us love in the YouTube comments on social media, or even a couple of people who came up to me at the game on Saturday. We appreciate each and every one of you. We wouldn't be doing this without your guys' support. And with that out of the way, folks, we've got a game that we have to talk about. Oregon and Idaho, they played each other this past weekend. And folks, I don't think it was quite the game anybody expected. The final score, 24-14, certainly nothing that we predicted. Nick, first and foremost, what'd you see out there? What was your initial impression of that ball game?
Yeah, well, in my experience producing a comedy show that night, I was, only able to catch the first half with my undivided attention. And I was pretty thankful in that second half, even though I was setting up at a brewery that had the game up on the screen. The owner mentioned it a couple times to me, and I had the Jerry Ellen call in my ear while I was setting up, but it didn't sound like it was much different than what I had seen in the first half. And when I came home and watched film, seemed to confirm it. It was a little bit frustrating, especially extra frustrating as an offensive lineman, but you got to say there's some positives there. We have a quarterback that just played his first game in Autzen Stadium and tied the record for completions with 41 out of 49. I mean, gosh, you got to say that. And then defense, I mean, that defensive line looks like it is going to cause a lot of problems this year. And those guys, some of those guys are just developing, and we're just beginning to see what they can be. So a couple positives from there. And one more I got to say is, again, as we had predicted, we have quite the tight end group. I can't wait to see the way they're utilized. We saw some interesting ways that we are going to use them, but kind of in a very vanilla way. And I think we didn't show much of our hand, but I don't think we also showed the big playability that Oregon is typically known for, with Idaho getting, three at least big plays that I remember, and Oregon not having any.
Well, and Nick, we're going to talk more about the big plays in just a moment. There's some points I want to bring up on that. Before we get into breaking down everything from a pretty critical perspective, as I have a feeling we're going to, let's talk about some of our guys of the game, some of the guys that showed up despite the result, despite maybe how Oregon looked on the field as a whole, some of the guys that you thought were really, really performing well on that field for Oregon this past weekend.
Well, I know his brother's getting torn apart in the college football world and on the internet, but Mateo Ugale, I'm always going to mess up that name, but man, much respect. This kid looks like a monster. I know that there's a couple series there in the first half where I really felt for that Idaho quarterback. He was taking some licks in there, and tough kid, tough team, but it was great to see his development through the offseason and to see him step up in some big moments there. And, with moments across the defense, but he's one that really stuck out to me.
Mateo was absolutely on my list, Nick. Let's keep it with the defense for right now, because this is a group that I could really enjoy talking about here for a while, as opposed to some of the more critical things we're going to have to say on the other side of the ball. A guy I wanted to list off right now before going anywhere else, Brandon Johnson III, the transfer from Duke. my oh my, did he look impressive, whether he was playing outside in the safety position, whether he was playing in the slot. The Nicolay had him all over the field on Saturday, and he was everywhere. He was getting after the ball. He was in there on tackles, had the interception, almost had the other one later in the game down that near sideline. He was everywhere, and I was genuinely impressed with how well the transfer came in and performed for Oregon.
Now, I'm going to give a highlight concept on offense because we're going to talk about offense a lot more probably in some of the lowlights. But a highlight in concept was a fullback. Oh my goodness. Sitting at home, I don't know if you've been able to hear the live broadcast yet, but you wouldn't believe, you could definitely tell who hasn't watched Oregon before and who thought this was just a complete it was like who could ever foresee Oregon going into the Big Ten and actually running an I formation with a fullback and maybe an extra offensive lineman? It's like I mean, we've run some packages before, but it was hilarious to hear their reaction. And it was just great to see us get a touchdown, fullback fitting up, getting a block and just leading to the right.
Well, I have to tell you, we were reacting pretty astounded as well from where we were sitting. We have to be honest. We were all, lots of the stadium was pretty excited when they saw that. Shout out to Gracie, the tight end, number 44, who slid back there and played that fullback position. I got to tell you, it's here in my notes. I have the words I formation with not just exclamation points, the Spanish exclamation points, the upside down one in front of it and the right side up one behind it, just because it was so excited and elated to be able to get to that and talk about that. So yes, I'm very happy that you have that marked down. That is absolutely a concept.
I'm glad we're step in step, just like a good offensive line tandem on that one.
You could see where you could say we're being rather cohesive, which I think is a thing we're going to talk about, not being as much a factor as we would have liked it to be this Saturday. If we're going over concepts that we're giving a gold star to, one more that I have to say that I absolutely love. I don't want to call it a full pick play because that's not what it is, but the man beater that Oregon ran twice in the red zone to get Tez Johnson touchdowns, having him from the slot be able to come up and out while having the other receiver drag his man all the way across that formation out of the way. Beautiful design. Oregon utilized twice for scores in that game.
Definitely. Love it. All right. Now I got to start off with the ugly.
Get into it. I know you've been needing to.
Up front, it was not what I had expected from the talent that we have there. I understand, with Charlie Picard taking over the middle, moving over Poncho to right guard. You'd expect maybe some breakdowns of communication, maybe not everybody quite on the same page, but it felt like guys were getting beat on the snap count or maybe not quite delivering the blocks and kind of falling into blocks, if you understand what that means from an offensive line perspective. And as a former offensive lineman, particularly on the right side, it was hard to watch a couple times, and especially when early you get your quarterback hits his hand to a delayed blitz, I believe. Those kind of things, you're just like, man, in the first game of the season, you don't want to see it, especially gave Boise State, Oregon State, and all the upcoming Big Ten teams plenty of film that they can lick their chops at right now and probably look at the Oregon offensive line and feel like they have some pretty good matchups.
Well, in this offensive line, I mean, Nick, halfway through the game, I was texting you and talking to you about it. It was something that we wanted to discuss. And I brought up the cohesive aspect of it earlier because that was something that you mentioned immediately. Said it looked like there wasn't a lot of cohesion along this line, whether it was a group that hadn't been playing together as much as we would have liked them to have been before that game, or just a group that wasn't in sync with each other that day. It seemed like there was a lot of things kind of happening off time, not really coming together the way that Lion would have loved to have seen it done. Idaho did a phenomenal job of taking advantage of the matchup they had. They recognized that they were playing against a very raw center, somebody who's got a ton of talent. It's going to take a little while to develop that kind of game speed and game ability at the college level. Seeing a guy like him taking advantage of it with those delayed blitzes, like you mentioned, the kind of play that got Gabriel's hand hit, Idaho really showed up for this game in the best way. They were eager on every snap. They were winning the leverage battle all the time. Where it seemed as if, and I've said it so many times to you this week, I could count about maybe 4 plays in watching the replay that Oregon's running backs weren't immediately in trouble. it seemed like within a yard, 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, every single play, somebody was getting hit, having to break a tackle. I can't tell you how many times Whittington made one miss in the backfield just to go down after gaining only a yard because of the next three. Jordan James, the same situation. That's not something that's going to be sustainable, especially with the Big Ten matchups Oregon has upcoming.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people really are going to recognize now the talent that Jackson Powers Johnson was, and you really need somebody to fill that void of not just being a consistent voice on the field and a leader, but I mean, he was a guy how many times was in the highlight reel out there leading and springing those big plays that were really lacking. So we need somebody from that offensive line to bring that unit together, lead, be that example that gets them all fired up, because you could definitely tell. I don't know if it was, and this isn't in any way to give an excuse to the performance. I think they wouldn't do that. I know the history of the offensive linemen we have at the University of Oregon take a lot of pride and no excuses. But from the things I saw, it looked like, a team that it didn't look like they were either playing in their home stadium or their first game. It looked like, they were a little beat up, a little slow off the ball, and a little out of sync. And those are things you can clean up, you can fix, and your preparation goes a lot into it. So I look forward to seeing how they rebound. I know, Coach Terry's going to coach them up, get them up and especially, the assistant coaching staff they have there, Coach Walk, Coach Kavanaugh, all those guys. I know they're going to get them right. I think it's a good opportunity. You'd rather have this happen against an Idaho where you can't kind of, dig yourself too deep than rather have it to, especially this week, Boise State or, on the road anywhere, but especially Oregon State this season. So if you're going to clean it up this week.
I mean, yeah, you absolutely are going to have to. And I think that they need to clean it up both in the run game, like we just mentioned, and in the pass game as well. Getting a guy like Gabriel to feel comfortable is going to be huge. Before we really got into things, you mentioned his completion percentage was very high this past weekend, 83%, 41 for 49 passing, setting a record for an Oregon player in a debut, I believe. Something that I don't think gets probably explained through the 41 of 49 as well as it probably should, though, were that it seemed like there were a lot of times where, yes, there was a completion, but it was a completion to a running back for about 2 to 3 yards, as opposed to taking an opportunity downfield where I can tell you whether it was Trayshawn Holden or whether it was Terrence Ferguson or even whether it was Tez Johnson a couple of times, there were absolutely opportunities further downfield. Now we have to take the hand into account. Obviously, he took the shot to Trayshawn on the first drive, hit the hand on the second drive. Offense kind of changed after that, it seemed a little bit. But it was still alarming to me to look at the statistics across college football and realize that of the top 50 passers from week one, Dillon Gabriel had by far the shortest long of the group. 24 yards was his longest pass play. That includes run after the catch.
Yeah.
Anybody else in the top 50 was, I think I saw one other in the 20s. Everybody else was mid 30s and above. So my question is for you, when it comes to being able to cause and create more of these explosive plays, whether in the run game or the pass game, from an offensive line perspective, and then from a quarterback perspective, how can Oregon move toward the offense being that explosive offense that fans are more used to?
Well, I mean, again, with that cohesion would come comfort. Obviously, it's easier to take those downfield shots when you're able to develop. You aren't having to move, shift the pocket. But a lot of this also is you're bringing in a new quarterback. You've graduated your center, graduated quarterback, center, and starting running back. These are things we're, obviously going to have to deal with. But I think ultimately, there's just scheme there that might not be executed yet, maybe not in the playbook yet. I wonder if there's anything, that they've just held off on install or showing that they feel really confident in. But yeah, I think when you're not taking a lot of those shots, that usually it means the defense is dictating what you're doing. When you just can only take away the dink and dunk and you can't force those deep shots and big plays. And hats off to Idaho, having a great game plan and being able to really step up caused a lot of problems for us, especially, along the interior there. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, you can get guys in better positions than we did. I think there was a lot of times where I'm like, I understand why we're getting an athlete like Sadiq the ball and putting him in positions where they can get yards, but it wasn't the ideal position. It didn't feel like we were doing too much to really confuse the defense. It felt like, they were pretty well prepared for whatever we threw at them, and vice versa. I think, one of the big takeaways is as soon as you get a sack fumble, your defense has to be prepared for some kind of trick play or deep shot. And they got us on that one that was reviewed. I don't know how that was for your experience in the stadium, but I remember watching it on TV and thinking, well, I don't think they have enough to overturn this. They got us.
Well, and I got to tell you, I think it was the same reaction in the stands for the most part, at least where I was, that most of the team seemed like they're having. Frankly, everyone was just kind of frustrated after the turnover. And quicker than not, I mean, I'll give you a quick play-by-play reaction of exactly how it went. It just went, oh, what are they doing? Oh my God, he's wide open. They just scored. It was just that kind of a reaction. Like everybody was a half second slow to it, except for Vandals players, Vandals fans. They were all over it. Nobody in an Oregon on the field or off was ready for that moment. Granted, though, and I'll give the defense credit for this, I think there were very few moments throughout the day that they weren't ready for. Yeah. Idaho scored on 2 trick plays. Credit to them; they were very well executed, very well run, and it took the drive to the red zone to create the second score. But besides that, it seemed like the only thing that was really beating Oregon throughout the game consistently were the screen passes that Idaho was able to pull off. Yeah. So I guess I would ask you, the only criticism that I do have of this defense, like I said, just the reaction to the trick plays and then the reaction to the screen passes and stuff like that. How is that something that you coach up and just make sure you get shored up, especially heading into a game where there are some very active players who can make those kind of things happen?
Yeah, and it's something I remember, a lot of Coach Aliotti teams are great at drilling in is, once you get that on film, especially early in the season, you can drill it into guys and then you incorporate that, especially into at least when we did it, when, pre-practice position drills where everybody on the defense, you'd see them working on pursuit angles and readjusting. And especially those big guys, with as great a pass rush as they're going to be able to put on, they're going to have to recognize when it's a little bit too easy, when the offensive lineman is kind of just giving them their chest, giving them that opportunity and being able to redirect, find where the ball is at and go and possibly make a huge play. Because when you get one of those big 300-pounders redirected into a running back trying to catch a football, bad things can happen for an offense. And I think, the more of that you get to see before the Big Ten season, the better, because there's some of these Big Ten teams that lull you into a sense of, false security and then will pop a big play on you. And I think that's a lot different than what we're used to seeing in a normal Pac-12 season.
And I completely agree with you. And the last thing I'm going to say on the defense, because frankly, they played well enough that I don't have a ton that I feel like I need to say about all of it in general. And it's just things that generally impress me. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it. First and foremost, the push the D-line was getting was impressive all game. I know we talked about the edges, but especially those transfers, Harmon and Cardwell, they were just getting pushed all game long. I thought the linebackers did very well, especially when they had to have guys come in throughout the game. Seemed like Bassa and Jacobs didn't play much, but Jackson and Betcher seemed to be doing their job for the most part.
Yeah. And that's, I think, another, negative, at least, and you can't put it on, the players. But yeah, injuries is particularly linebackers a little bit concerning there, in the amount of snaps we're going to need from guys this season, and having guys already out in that game is a little concerning. But hey, who knows? Only the team right now is really aware of how significant the injuries are for, particularly at that position. And, and I think very interested in, but we didn't get to see as much of the depth on offense, but it felt like we definitely got to see a lot more of that, like we were talking about and expecting to see in our analysis for last episode.
Well, and I agree. And I think the secondary was another very good example of that, whether it was Turner getting a lot of those reps in the first half, playing quite well over at safety. A guy like Nico Reed, who came in third corner a lot, got physical with a couple of big plays, got the interception late that kind of sealed the game. It was great to see a lot of those guys being able to get out there, especially with the rotation that Oregon's going to be hoping to have defensively throughout the season.
Definitely. And the play on that first interception, absolutely necessary at that point of the game. So, big props. That's a play that needed to be made, and excellent interception.
Absolutely, Nick. The last group part of this game that I want to touch on with you, special teams. Talked a lot about the offense.
Yeah.
Talked a lot about defense. Special teams had a very up and down game. Something that I loved that we didn't see all of last season: kickoff consistency. Sappington was putting that thing to the back of the end zone every single time. Nothing going out of bounds. Nothing short. That was all very consistent. He was 1 of 2 on field goals. Hit the one that he should. Missed one from like 50 out that had plenty of leg. It just wasn't accurate enough. But more interestingly, I want to talk to you about the failed fake punt.
Yeah.
Walk me through what you saw there, and then just talk to me about your idea of using that in general, especially at this point in the season and right there.
I mean, personally, man, this goes back to high school. I've always been iffy on fake punts in general, especially depending on who your specialists are. Sometimes you have that rare kind of athlete that can make something happen, but sometimes I think special teams coaches have a lot of ideas and a lot of things they'd like to do. And then the amount of practice time you get to go out there and execute it against a realistic looking, defense or setup, that's always difficult. So, I mean, I loved a lot of what, back in my day, Coach Oz used to draw up for our guys out there. But man, yeah, I've, uh, I know, and the commentary on that was interesting too. I also wanted to point out I loved that when we went out and got that first touchdown, and we go out and the announcers announced, "Oh, Oregon with their traditional swinging gate formation." So that was certainly, it gave me a laugh and an old pat on the back for the old Coach Greatwood throwback days. So just again, not great, some ups and downs, and again. I'd like to see, particularly and maybe not against Boise, or Oregon State, but sometime later in this year, man. It's been too long. We need some special teams, big play touchdowns. That used to be, huge staple of big Oregon games, and I think that's going to be a key to getting things back in the right direction.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think some of the biggest plays from Oregon teams historically, whether it was the Keenan Howeries of the world, whether it was the Patrick Chungs, the Walter Thurmans, the Cliff Harrises, even the Braylon Addisons, the Charles Nelsons, those guys being able to go get big special teams touchdowns or just huge returns to turn the tide of a game, turn the momentum, were always huge. And I think you're absolutely right. Oregon being able to net a couple of those throughout this season would be huge, not just in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of really changing the tides for, at least as of right now, where everything seems to be energy-wise.
Yeah. Well, in terms of changing the tides too, I'm going to say during the game in just the first half, filled up the swear jar, but now we've got everything out of the way, negatives, positives, everything. We're going to go ahead, dump out the swear jar for this next game and start anew. So hoping Boise State, man, I don't think we're going to have near as much to complain about on the negatives, and I'm hoping we're going to have that many more positives and explosive plays that we could talk about.
And folks, we're going to get into that Boise State game here in just a little while. We're going to have plenty to break down, including talking uniform, talking Boise State, talking those predictions. But before that, Nick, we got a pretty special guest coming on. Why don't you tell everybody who we got?
Yeah, everybody's been talking about how we might need some more reinforcements along the offensive line. And with our positive enthusiasm we have towards Boise State. So we've got the perfect guy. You guys that have watched previous episodes, you know him. And if you haven't watched those episodes, go back and watch him. He's one of the best offensive linemen, Mark Asper. Guy used to play right alongside of on the offensive line. Our man, Mark Asper. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, glad to be back. Doing good.
So we're coming off a interesting and a bit frustrating Idaho game to watch as an offensive lineman, and going into a Boise State week that I know you got a lot of feelings about. But first and foremost, I'm going to ask you, how did you end up watching the game? What was your experience like?
I had some fatherly duties. We were running around doing some of that stuff. So I got the first half by update only, and getting those updates, it was like, I thought I'd missed a few. I thought maybe I'd gone in and out of service. Like, maybe we don't have maybe they stopped giving me updates after we scored once or twice. I was expecting to get home and get the real update, and it'd be, 35-7, or, I was expecting a few more points on offense, expecting things to move a little more fluidly, I guess. So the first half, getting it by update only, I thought there were technical issues, and that's what was going on. Why the Ducks weren't doing better. Then I got home, turned it on, did the catch up, and started watching, and I was like, no, we're just not, that lack of explosive plays that was my favorite part of being a Duck, which I think everybody's come to expect from us, is those quick hitters, scoring fast, big explosive plays. We just didn't get any of those. So watching the game was a little frustrating. And then when they cut it down to a one-score game, then it was like, okay, guys, quit messing around. Let's get serious here.
Mark, before you came on, Nick and I, we were discussing offensive line play for a good while. And I got to say, I think it's the first thing that a lot of Duck fans noticed when they were watching the game. It was something I obviously noticed watching the game there in person in Eugene. From your perspective, just in a very broad sense, what was really something that stuck out to you? What were you noticing on the field that was kind of keeping Oregon from being able to produce those big plays you were just talking about?
Nick and I, we were fortunate to kind of grow up under the tutelage of some pretty nasty, ornery veteran linemen. We had Max Unger, we had Josh Shergy, we had Pat Sawallo, we had Mark Lewis, and those dudes, what they lacked in, star power. I know Max is an exception to that, but what they lacked in like just raw athleticism, they made up for it in just nastiness and just finishing blocks, finding work, making sure that they made contact with somebody on every play. And there was a lot of just a lack of nastiness, a lack of finish, which I think comes with, I have another friend who was talking to me today about, he was talking about injuries with players and how they've dialed practices down. I coach high school football now, and this today is Toughness Tuesday, and then we're in pads for a few hitting drills tomorrow. But like the amount of contact and just hitting and live drills and stuff that they do at practice nowadays is so dialed back because they're trying to keep guys healthy. But I think because of that, you run the risk of potentially having situations like this where it just looked like guys weren't really ready to go. They weren't ready to, drive guys to the finish. And I'm not saying be dirty. I'm just saying play offensive line within the framework of being a lineman, where you're taking dudes to the ground, you're driving them into piles, you're getting after it and mixing it up and just being kind of nasty, which was kind of the glare. One of the first things I thought of just watching the play. There was a lot of catch and then react, not a whole lot of taking the fight to Idaho. And I did tell a lot of people before the game, respecting all opponents, doing that whole thing. I was telling people Idaho is not the Idaho of a decade ago. They're doing better than they have done in a long time. Credit to them for doing what they did. But at the same time, it didn't look like a number 3 program in the country, national championship expectation type performance from the guys up front.
Well, it's good to hear that you're bringing Toughness Tuesdays up there to your neck of the woods, and we'll be releasing this on a Fast Friday, I'm sure. So good to get that out there. But with your experience and familiarity with both Idaho and Boise, what's it like, do you think, for those players to get an opportunity in Autzen Stadium?
Everybody I often get asked which is my favorite stadium I ever played in, and a lot of people assume that I'll mention one of the pro stadiums or the marquee destination places. And I always say Autzen Stadium. It is by far my favorite place to ever play. It's the environment, the fun, the noise. It is unduplicatable, unreplicatable are those words. It's so cool and unique, and you don't realize what you have until you start going on the road and going to other places and seeing how other people, other stadiums are. But For Boise State, I think, and the guys from Idaho, Idaho's quarterback, right? I saw during the game, they cut away to him in the stands with his dad, and he's wearing the diamond plate. So he was probably in the stands when me and you were,
Yep.
On the field playing. So, it's a dream destination. Oregon is a premier school. It's a dream location. I'm sure there's some guys on Idaho's roster, and there's probably some guys at Boise State's roster that wished or wanted to play for Oregon. So to go there, it does have that, premier destination, big time feel to it. But then, as you know, Nick and a lot of guys will say that played the game, once the game gets rolling and the lights come on and the adrenaline kicks in, like the crowd and the noise, they kind of disappear. At least if you're doing what you need to do and handling your business, the crowd and everything just kind of vanishes for a little while.
Mark, a little bit more in regard to the game we just watched on Saturday. One thing that Nick texted me before the game was even over, we mentioned it earlier, but he texted me that cohesion seemed off in general. It just seemed like the guys weren't working together. A phrase that I love that Nick's taught me is 5 is 1, the idea that 5 guys are moving as one all together on that line. If you're working with your team, or if you're working with any group of guys that are having trouble with that cohesive aspect of the game, what's something you're bringing to practice? What's something you're bringing to that meeting room that can help bring those guys together, both in that off the field sense, but also in that 5 is 1 on the turf mindset?
It's something that when Chip took over, he would bring in like guest speakers quite often to talk to us about stuff. Guys, former players, people from the community, just people in general that had accomplished, amazing things, just to talk about, greatness and being great and how to achieve that stuff. And one of the guys he brought back was Joey Harrington. And when he came in, all he talked about was spending time together. Like, if you guys want to be cohesive and be a unit and be willing to do what it takes to be a championship caliber team together, you have to spend time together off the field. You have to, football is a violent game. It takes a lot out of everybody. And even in, college or the professional teams, the teams in the professional leagues that I played with that were successful, be it the Broncos the year they won the Super Bowl, or the Patriots the year they won the Super Bowl, versus the Jaguars when we went 2-14 when I was there. The difference is that cohesion and guys that care about each other, that love each other, that want to play for each other, right? Because it's tough, it's violent, and there's times where your body says, dude, stop, tap out, your knees hurt, your neck hurts, your shoulder hurts, like coach is asking you to pull around this edge and crash into a blitzing linebacker again. Don't do it, it's going to hurt. But you do it because, your teammates are there and you're doing it for them. Like, I have to do this so the running back can do his job, or I have to do this to protect my quarterback. I have to do this, that sense of brotherhood is what supersedes the need to, like, self-preservation. Like, I don't want to do that. That's going to hurt. You have to be able to flip that off and be like, I have a job and a duty to protect my teammates. And that's very much the, alignment, maybe an alignment only thing, right? The perspective, but that cohesion with an offensive line, with a whole team, you want the whole team to spend time together as much as possible. With high school teams, we do things off the field with our guys. They see each other at school all day, but getting them out of school, out of football, and putting them in environments where they just spend time together. We have a lake day, or, cookies and milk at somebody's house, or you just do things to spend time together off the field to build that respect and that camaraderie one with another. And I think offensive line play, more than any other position, maybe quarterbacks and receivers and their timing on like routes and stuff like that is another element, but the line play working together and that nonverbal communication and knowing how a guy is going to pass off a double team or how a guy passes off a twist or something like that, that can't be, that has to be repped. It can't be manufactured. in any false way. It has to be done in high tempo, high stakes practices or live bullets in a game.
So something that can be manufactured, and I'd love to ask you about, is hype. One thing, do you think that the amount of hype Oregon has had going into the season might have lended itself to that performance? And how have you in your career been able to help shut out that noise and just focus on what you can control?
Yeah, I don't know. I have seen. I only made it through one of them. Oregon started putting out those half-hour episodes of
Hard Knocks.
Basically Hard Knocks. Yeah, and it was I made it through half of the first one, and I was like, this is too much to consume in one sitting. Like I know, but I think the Ducks have been, and this crew and this coaching staff have been relevant long enough that they should be able to understand that the pressure and the limelight and the attention that they've been getting, and the messaging is there. So I've heard that as well, that maybe there was overhype and over expectations as maybe an excuse for the Ducks. I personally don't buy it. I think these guys, they've been, Oregon has been a premier, destination in a top 10 team for, pretty consistently, especially last year. And a lot of these guys, that was the one thing, why we got that preseason ranking is because we, more than a lot of places, had some retention. We had a lot of guys stay. A lot of our coaches didn't, skip town and go for better or other jobs. So, that part, they should be able, I feel like they should have be able to handle that and know what to do in that situation. And I don't remember if it's a chipism or if it's, I think it is, but you used to always say fame and blame are the same, right? People will come after you when you're losing. Don't listen to it and read the articles when you're losing. Don't listen and read the articles and buy into it when you're winning, right? They'll praise you and sing your songs when you're kicking butt, and then they'll forget your name when you're losing. So don't buy into that. And that idea of preparing and competing against faceless opponents, and that's something that, for my high school team that I coach at, this week is our rivalry game, and our head guy, who grew up in Oregon and is a Duck fan as well, which is why we get along so well. But he takes he says a lot of chipisms, and he talks to the guys about, if you're a little, if you didn't prepare last week as much as you're preparing this week, just because we're going up against our rival, like there's something wrong with your preparation. You need to approach every opponent with that same sense of urgency and that same mentality of that you preparing and competing against the best version of yourself. And if you're the best version of yourself and the best that you can do, then the outcome will take care of itself, right? And when I was with the Patriots, that was something that Coach Belichick used to, it was just in the culture of the team where they talked about it all the time. Like, we're going to focus on what we do. We're going to do what we do really, really, really well. And then whoever we go up against, we'll make the adjustments we need to. But first and foremost, we need to take care of what we do really, really well and be the best at what we do, and then worry about what we're going up against. So I think the Ducks need to just, do that. Not, as if they had trouble tuning out the hype, hopefully they can do a better job of tuning out the criticism or using it as motivation, right? Criticism is a great motivator. We were talking before we came on, Jeff Schwartz just, retweeted Oregon's offensive line coach was wearing a shirt to practice, 2.9 yards per carry versus Idaho as like motivation. Like, this is below our standard, right? This is not the best version of us. We need to be better and take care of our business so that whomever we're going against.
Well, Mark, we've talked a lot about what Oregon needs to do. I'm curious about Oregon's opponent a little bit, especially a particular perspective that you and Nick are definitely going to have on this one. You guys got to play against, or got to is a fun word for it, but you guys, the opportunity to play against some of the most impressive non-Power 5 football teams that were ever assembled in those late 2000 Boise State teams. I'm curious, everybody talks about and knows about what they were able to do offensively, what Coach Peterson brought to the game, but very rarely do people look back on those teams, especially from a defensive perspective, to see really what they brought. I'm curious, from your guys' perspective, guys would line up against the Billy Winns of the world, these guys that did end up having NFL careers after playing at Boise State. What did these teams bring defensively that was so different, and what did they do that not a lot of Power 5 teams were able to do and haven't been able to do since?
I think first and foremost, they were extremely confident, right? Coach Pete, they were able to manufacture an insane amount of confidence, and that home field advantage in Boise State, the blue turf, that played into it, where they had that, we don't lose at home mentality. And I think, they've had one of the most impressive or longest running home win streaks in the country or for a long time. And then going on the road, even when they came to Autzen my freshman year, and we had the yellow, the cursed yellow Vegas Bowl helmets that were rebranded, because that's a whole side topic where they try to unjinx a uniform combination. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. They were trying to unjinx that Vegas Bowl, yellow helmet with like the whisper of flames you can just barely see. They were trying to unjinx those, like, hey, we'll throw these on, we'll go play Boise State. Didn't work, but I think Boise State had that, like you said, that Power 5, non-Power 5, like giant killer mentality. Oregon State had a string where they had that confidence of being just giant killers. When USC came in ranked in the top 10 and then got upset, and some other teams, like, it's a very real thing, confidence. And that's why you play the games. That old saying, you play the games aren't won on paper. You have to go out and still play the games. Teams still have to execute, and confidence is something that can sway the balance in your favor. And I think, that Oregon team that played Boise State at Autzen my freshman year, I really do think that they overlooked them a little bit. Like, we got this, we'll take care of business. And then the next one, when we went to Boise State my sophomore year, then it was like, the LeGarrette Blount famously quoted, "We owe them boys a whooping." And, they had that home field confidence. Their defense, I just remember that night, blue field and blue players, they were wearing their all blue unis on the blue field. I just remember feeling like they were everywhere. Like they were coming from everywhere. And it's kind of disorienting to be all blue and them blue. I don't know. I just remember feeling a little disoriented on the field because it felt like they were coming from everywhere. Like, we'd run a play and it'd be like, I got this guy, CE's got that guy, Jordan's got that guy, and there was somebody would still shoot through and tackle LeGarrette. And I was like, where did that flipping guy come from? Like, it was unreal. So they used all of the things, I guess the what do you call them, the non-traditional or the X factor, things to their advantage. And then they were, you look back at those coaching staffs, they had a bunch of really good coaches, very, early in their careers, that were doing a lot of things really, really well, that have all gone on to be successful in other programs. So kudos to them.
Yeah, and Sam, another thing to point out is I didn't get to play in either of those games. Redshirted in that 2008 year, and then that 2009 opener, they just schemed us up so well that they dominated time of possession. I remember going into halftime and just looking around at offensive guys in our little gymnasium locker room of an offensive room there, and just looking around at guys and going like, do we get even 15 plays in that half? It was just what a game plan. So thinking back, and you said we might have overlooked them, I do remember a certain offensive lineman stepping up in a team meeting and trying to warn guys, I guess, say, maybe bolster some of that Boise State hate. What can you tell me that you remember about that speech, and how do you feel it was received?
Yeah, those that were there will recall, yeah, I declared that I hate Boise State. That was a nice rhyming bumper sticker that I put out into the universe because I grew up in Idaho. I've moved back to Idaho since then, and I went on after high school, I went on a mission for my church for 2 years. The like right before I got home was Boise State versus Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl thing. So when I got home, like every person I talked to, they were like, "Oh, you going to Oregon? That was stupid. You should have gone to Boise State. They're the world's greatest team. Did you see what they did? Oh man, Statue of Liberty. Oh, proposed to his girlfriend who's a cheerleader after the game. No, it's amazing." And I was just like, "What is this?" Like 2 years before, and all through my high school career, Boise State's football program didn't exist. They didn't even they didn't even come calling. Like I didn't even get recruited to play football for Boise State. Like I got a couple of letters and visits for basketball because the state championship for basketball was in Boise, and some of their coaches must have stopped by and they're like, "Oh, that's a big athletic dude. Would you like to play basketball at Boise State?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm really not that good at basketball. I appreciate the love, but I'm going to go play football." And so I had those. I got back from my mission in January, and so until I got to Oregon in the spring, that 3 months, everywhere I went, every gym I went to try to get back into shape in my hometown. "Oh man, you sure missed out. You should have gone to Boise State. They're so much better than Oregon." And I was like, "Can it?" So I had a little bit of want to like shut these guys up so that when I would go home in the off season or other times of the year, I could proudly wear my Oregon colors and have everybody leave me alone. And so just trying to put it into perspective to guys, I was like, "Hey guys, I hate Boise State. I don't like what they do. I feel like a lot of their fans were, just very biased, to what they were doing and how good they thought they were." And so I was like, "Please, for my sake, do me a solid, go after this one, do what we're supposed to do." And that 2008 game, we got upended, and it was like, I was kind of like, "Great guys, now I have to go home and put up with this." And then that next year I was like, "Okay, let's take care of business. Let's do our thing." But like you said, Nick, we were 3-and-out like very quickly, and just everything, like that whole game, that whole night felt so funky. Kind of the silver lining to that, as time's gone on, there's some people remember that Boise State beat Oregon in that game, but as bad as it was, and I don't condone it in any way, shape, or form, but LeGarrette doing what he did after the game, that has lived on in infamy forever and ever. I get asked about that more than anything, about that game and that night. Like nobody, like who won the game is like, tell me about the fight. What did LeGarrette say? What did he do? What were you guys thinking? What was that like? And I'm like, it's that that adage, we lost the battle, but we won the fight, so we'll take it.
Well, Mark, if you're going to bring it up, I guess I'd better ask the question that everybody on here is wondering and thinking about. I don't need to know where you were during the moment, what was said, what wasn't, any of that stuff. My only curiosity is, what is that locker room like afterwards? What is that trip back, whether on the plane or the bus afterwards? And then what's the next week around the facility like? Moving around, coaching staff, everybody who's around there. Scott Frost still has white knuckles from holding on as tight as he can. Just what is it like being around the program the days after such an event?
Yeah, it was cool. Looking back, in the moment, obviously was unreal, but looking back, it was a really cool experience because when we got into the locker room, everybody was ready to tear each other apart. Like we'd been embarrassed on the football field. We didn't play the way we wanted to. And then we'd been embarrassed with the fight and the skirmish and everything that happened. So like everybody was at each other's throats, just yelling at each other. Offense was yelling at defense. Defense was yelling at offense. Everybody was yelling at, each other. Like, "We ain't about this. This isn't what we are. This isn't us. Like, what are we doing?" I remember Chip comes in and is like, "Shut up. Nothing's going to get fixed right here, right now. change your clothes, pack your bags. We'll see you in Eugene. Just nobody talk. Shut up. And I was like, well said. We did that. We go home. That was, that was a Thursday, college football opener, right? So we had to put up with sports talk, ESPN on Friday. They had, talking about us. Saturday, they'd bring it up. Sunday, they'd bring it up. And everybody fell into like two camps. They were like, well, Chip's got a decision. He can either crack down hard and set a precedent as being a tough-nosed coach and, suspend LeGarrette and never let him play a down of football, or he can be a pushover and let LeGarrette play and just, lose all accountability and just be, a coach that cares more about football than about players. Like every talking head that I listened to, they kind of framed it up as Chip's got one of two options: kick LeGarrette off and be a tough-nosed coach, keep LeGarrette and be a pushover. And then we got back, team meeting first thing Monday. Chip comes in and he's like, yeah, I'm not doing either of those things. LeGarrette stays. He doesn't get to play football. Football's a privilege. He's going to go to school. He's going to do his community service. He's going to, go to counseling. He's going to do these things. And if he re-earns the right to play football, we'll bring him back with open arms, because that's the right thing to do for LeGarrette. Because he's like, if we kick LeGarrette off the team, he's going to go back home. He's never going to, not going to go to college. He's not going to finish college. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that. Like, what is LeGarrette's life going to be like if we abandon him and kick him out of the program? But he also looked at it as what does that send to the rest of the team? And, that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about Chip Kelly as a coach, was his consistency about doing what was best for the players. He tried to do the same thing with some of our other guys, high profile guys that got in trouble later on. He ran that same play. He's like, this is what you got to do. And he didn't bend the rules or bring out exercise bikes for guys on the team to like skate by. He was very much like, no, these are the rules for everybody. You abide by them or we'll find somebody else. And so I remember after that experience, and then it was done. It was like, then that's, period. Now let's focus on the next game and let's move forward.
So, Mark, you'd mentioned earlier a little bit about just how Idaho had turned its program around in terms of perception. Well, what's a little bit about, Oregon fans need to realize about the changes that have been happening in Boise State the past couple of years that you've recognized?
I will say Idaho is you are my people. I'm one of you. Don't, anybody that's from Idaho that hears this, don't take shade. We are a very, very fair weather state. We don't have a lot of pros. We don't have any pro sports teams. When Boise State was riding high, everybody was a Boise State fan. Now that it's tempered a bit more, they're not as consistently, the top of the power, the non-Power 5 rankings, and that perennial, one place out of the playoff type team. I don't see as many proud Boise State fans and bumper stickers and flags and trash talkers, right? They've slid a little bit. I see a lot more, honestly, I see a lot of Oregon and a lot of Oregon fans, a lot of Oregon stickers, and, some UW stuff has popped up over the last year or so with what they were able to do. But, so Boise State is I feel like is in a little bit of that transition. They're trying to bring back what was good from the past and put their own, unique stamp and be their own team and have their own identity, stuff like that. Do you remember Eric Chinander?
Yep, of course. Yeah. Coach Chins.
Yep. Chins is there. I've reached out to him a couple of times and talked about some things. So I think their defense is going to be, biased because of my relationship with Chins. I think defense is going to be where they're going to have to find success. it's that old adage when one team sees you struggle with something, the next team is going to do that to you as well. So, and they talk about, is this the blueprint to beat somebody, or is this the blueprint as they figured out how to crack the code? That used to be something we used to hear all the time when we were in Oregon. When somebody would handle our tempo really well, or they'd handle the spread really well, they'd be like, "Oh, looks like Cal has cracked the code. They figured out how to beat the Ducks and how to hold them to under 100. So let's see if next week's team is going to copy that same formula, right?" The formula may be there, but do you have the personnel? Do you have the discipline? Do you have the game planning to sustain that plan? That's a different question. So I think Boise State is going to have a good identity and some consistency with their defense. It sounds like from just the channels and the conversations, they're a little bit in the wind with some of their offensive production, or just players and playmakers and stuff like that. So hopefully, their strength is their defense, and our offense is, like we've talked about, is in its identity, its cohesion building phase. Hopefully those two things clash up for a good game, and they, obviously our offense gels and we have a good production, because it's not, I'm not used to sweating over Duck games until, October. Let's keep September fun and fancy free.
Mark, I just got one more for you. We don't want to take too much of your time up. It's a little bit of a two-parter, though. First off, what do you need to see from Oregon to feel really good about things this weekend? And then the day before that, on Friday, what do you need to see from your fellas to feel good about this rivalry matchup?
Hey, okay. I love Coach Bellatti's keys to victory. They were always the same, and they were always true. Run the ball, stop the run, get after their quarterback, protect ours. Special teams, be special. Be special. But in seriousness, like I said at the beginning, one of the statistical indicators that has a high probability to predict victory is explosive plays, running plays of 15 or more yards, passing plays of 20 or more yards. You have to have the team that has the most of those. And, like I said, that's the brand of Oregon Duck football I'm accustomed to, and I really like watching. So I would love for them to, and I don't like manufactured explosive plays. Like you can't survive with trick plays and gimmicks, right? It has to be part of your offense. A dive, a counter, a slant that pops, or a screen that pops for explosive plays, because everybody's doing their job. That's what makes me sleep well at night for the Ducks. Like, just, can we manufacture explosive plays in our offense, not scheme up and manufacture stuff like that. For the rivalry game, for the Hillcrest Knights tonight, or on Friday night, which will be, I guess, tonight when this airs. So for my Knights, it's same thing. It's just execution. Control the line of scrimmage, protect our quarterback, and then make good plays on special teams. Because the Bonneville Bees, who we're going up against, they've got a new coach, new head coach over there. They've got some athletes. They've got some big boys. And so my guys are a little smaller. So it's can we handle those big guys up front and get the ball to our playmakers in space and win the day, baby.
Well, Coach, we wish you and your boys the best. Before we let you get out of here, you got a score prediction for Saturday? And if so, what is it?
Let's go with, I'm going to go wishful thinking. I'm wanting Oregon 45, Boise State 17.
Love it. That would be a great way to bounce back. And thanks for coming on and helping us bounce back this week with our podcast, Mark. We always appreciate you.
Absolutely. Love being on. Love what you guys do. Thank you.
Thank
Go
you,
Ducks.
Mark. Go Ducks. All right. Well, with that interview, I'm feeling a lot better about this week. Nighttime, night game, Autzen Stadium. Sam, I know you'll be there. I won't be, unfortunately, but hey, I'm excited for everybody that gets to go. And it's just been awesome to be able to talk with somebody that has that actual experience of being up there in Idaho and knowing both the Idaho and Boise State programs a bit better than we do.
Well, you know, we love having Mark Asper on here. He's somebody who's always a pleasure to be able to get on the podcast, hear his perspective on these things. I loved hearing what he had to say about the Idaho schools, but also as a guy who, you know, started 20 plus games at guard in his career, it's always good to hear what he has to say, especially about the interior happenings of the offensive line as he was able to mention. But Nick, like we said in the interview, it is Boise State week. As much as we enjoyed or, you know, had to get through talking about the Idaho game, it's time to talk about Boise State and the challenges they present to Oregon. Yep. What are kind of your first thoughts on this game beyond the Boise State and Oregon of it all? What are you seeing on the field for this one?
Well, I mean, ultimately, there is the incentive now. You're Oregon, you're 0-3 against this team in previous matchups. That, I mean, some people say that doesn't matter. I think in this situation, especially coming off the way you played against Idaho, taking pride in making sure you get this win is huge. And how you're going to do that is, number one, as we talked about, shoring things up on the offensive line, whether that is because we get a couple different rotations looked at out there, or if guys are able to step up, maybe get a little more treatment this week, get healthy, whatever it is, man, it all has to start up front, in my opinion. And we've got to go and deliver and take the line of scrimmage and move it back with our offensive linemen into Boise's backfield and not ours.
Well, I think you're exactly right. Getting push in this game it's going to be really big. Taking a quick peek at Boise State as a team, they are a run-oriented ball club. This is one that on offense, their goal is going to be to try to run the football on you. And defensively, that's the first thing they're going to be trying to stop as well. I want to be able to talk about a player for Boise that I think he has all the local headlines and the national ones. They're starting to follow him as well. That's going to be their running back, number 2, Gentry, Ashton Gentry. Last week against Georgia Southern, he put up 267 yards on the ground. And only 20 carries, he got all that done.
Yep.
Oregon's defensive line, they looked really strong in this past game, but really batting down the hatches, looking out for him, especially in the screen game. Like we saw Idaho be able to take advantage of Oregon a little bit. I think it's going to be huge in this one. When you're going into a game, Nick, against a team that has a quality of a player like Gentry, somebody you know is going to be a problem out of the backfield one way or another, what's something that you know this team is going to be focusing on? How do you focus on taking out a guy like that?
Well, particularly matching up with whatever offensive formations. Now, whether they're trying to run the ball out of a spread or they're trying to get extra guys in there, you're trying to create advantages in your run matchups. You're trying to have an advantage at the line of scrimmage and in the box particularly. And Boise's great setting up those matchups, but it's going to be important for Oregon to utilize their depth in different packages to give Boise different looks so that they aren't consistently running against the same things, that maybe you're able to have a delayed pressure or give them something they haven't seen on film that you didn't use against Idaho, that you're able to use to get some big plays on defense, get a turnover or a big tackle for a loss. And that's really important in doing on first or second down to stop being able to really limit and force the other team into passing downs on third and long. And if you're able to do that, you get them out of their ability to have that successful screen game in kind of that middle yardage scenario. When the screen is really predictable is when it's third and long and you don't feel very confident in your downfield passing game. So if you can put them in those scenarios, you already got your defensive lineman kind of thinking about, hey, it's third down, might be a screen coming here. And that's going to be huge after what we've put on film against Idaho.
The rest of the Boise State offense, they do have some playmakers. Madsen, the quarterback, number 4, a talented guy, and a pair of receivers who can go get it done. Camper, he had 99 yards on only 4 catches. Number 9 for them, he's an absolute beast. And then Caples, he was able to have 81 yards on 5 receptions. This Boise State team, yes, they were playing Southern Georgia, but also They're a team that can go out there and they can put some points on you really quick. I really do like what the program has done with the coaching change after those years with Andy Avalos, being able to kind of right the ship at the end of last season, get a full offseason with this new regime. I think this is a Boise State team that, yeah, they might not be at that Chris Peterson level that they were at some years ago. But this is a real threat in the Mountain West.
Absolutely. And you're going to have to match their hype. That's going to be important. If you can't get excited for a night game in Autzen Stadium, though, especially in September when it's probably going to be awesome, man, you need to check your heartbeat because you might not have a pulse anymore.
How could you not? I mean, it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be an exciting one out there. All the fans, they're going to be wearing their green. They're going to be loud and excited. And I'll tell you what, this is going to be a crowd that's into this game from the jump. This is going to be a crowd that wants to see Oregon go out there, really take the bull by the horns or take the Bronco by the mane, if you will, and really apply pressure, put themselves in a good position, and separate themselves early. Like we said in the interview, if this is a uncomfortable game, not even at halftime, at the end of the first quarter, Oregon fans are going to be upset. They're going to be loud. It's going to be boisterous and awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And, who knows? I'm excited to see at the opportunity. And, that Coach Lanning and his staff are going to have these guys ready. I think from everything we've heard in the media this week so far, it sounds like they're very aware of the expectations of the program not being met in terms of the fans and inside those walls there. At the HDC. So that's always important. And those guys really have to show everyone, that they're not going to let that one game phase or define them. In fact, they're going to bounce back from it.
Also, Nick, I could be wrong about this one. It's more than possible I am. Do you know the last time Oregon pulled out a green, black, green uniform combo?
You're going to have to let me know. You're the uniform master.
2007 hosting USC.
Oh, wow.
It's been some time. It's been some time, but that's a very fun last game to have to that combo.
My official visit as a recruit. That was October 27th?
Something along those times. I don't have the exact date up in front of me. I'm looking at the picture of the matchup. But
hey,
that sounds about right to me.
Take that, CTE. We're winning today.
Well, folks, and with winning in mind, Nick, why don't we get to these predictions for this game? Last week, I think we both overshot a little bit with what we saw might happen. I'm glad to say that I felt sort of right in saying Idaho might get about 2 scores, but it was a little overshot on my Oregon account. I'll be honest about that. So what do you feel going into this week? What's your prediction for Oregon versus State?
I love that transition, sir. Are you just assuming I'm predicting an Oregon win here? Maybe. I'm going 37-17 Oregon Ducks. Okay. All right. I was way off last week, though, and was not respectful enough to our opponent. Won't be happening this week. I do give Boise at least. I think it'll be probably pretty close in the first 2 quarters, but I really expect kind of that third quarter kind of shift in the game. What Coach Lanning talks about that middle 8. I think that's going to be really important to see how we finish out the half and come out in the third quarter, because that needs to step up remarkably. So, that's my prediction. What do you got?
I think that I'm with that. I'm really close to yours. I had mine written down earlier, and it is very close to yours. I'm a little less optimistic offensively, I will say. I have this one about 34-17 Oregon.
Ooh,
I think about 4 touchdowns, 2 field goals is about right. I really like the idea of Oregon being able to hold Boise State to a field goal on one of those 3 scoring drives, but I do see about 3 scoring drives, especially with the talent they have on offense. As usual, anybody and everybody, we want their predictions as well. So if you have not yet, if you're watching this, if you're listening to it, go on social media, go on X, go on Instagram, chime in, let us know your final score predictions. Nick, I know we've had some good fan engagement this week. Why don't you kick it up and tell us a little bit about what some of the fans are thinking, especially after that last week's game?
Yeah, well, we got a ton of great responses. You can do that right now in the comments down below. Maybe comment with your fellow Once a Duck fans and let them know your thoughts. I do know after our response or episode came out, there are some comments here that look a lot different now after the Idaho game. Particularly at Angie Massamore said, "Don't like looking too far ahead, but hopefully both us and Buckeyes are undefeated and game day heads there for it." And with Oregon dropping down to seventh, it's still realistic, but I definitely think those expectations are looking way too far down the road. It's going to be a 1 week season every single week, I think, until this Oregon team is able to really get it going, get everything clicking, and it's kind of like us getting back into the podcasting form here, Sam. We're doing all right, but man, we're going to be really good by the time we get to Big Ten season.
And I hope that that's the case for both this Oregon team and our podcast. I'll say right
Absolutely.
now, those are both things that are going to be very important. Earlier today when we were recording, sure, it doesn't matter. We'll break that fourth wall. Earlier today, the day we're recording this, we were able to post up on X or Twitter, however you like to call it. So now that we've had a few days to process the Idaho game, how do you feel about Boise State? We had a lot of really good responses there. Some that were more positive, some that were more negative. I'm going to start with my buddy Alex at Book of Luego, who was able to respond. If they win big by like 21 plus, I think we will all forget what happened week one.
Hey, great point. Another one I saw there at GoDucks 280 said CFB is week to week, survive in advance. Washington did it all last season. I don't care what the stats look like at the end of the game, just win. Now, at the end of the day, that's the right answer. And it might suck. Some of the games are going to be difficult, but how many times did we watch Washington last season almost against the Beavers, almost against us? It felt like multiple times. They just overcame, got the W at the end of the day until thankfully Michigan took care of it in the end. Thank you, Michigan and Connor Stallions.
We got another one from Dr. Cannabis Coca-Cola at NietsBucks1. Georgia Southern University put 45 points on Boise State. This will be my litmus test. We will finally learn the answer to the age-old question, who has a better offense, Oregon or Georgia Southern?
A fantastic bit of social media engagement there. I'm going to go on to at Rogue Jim C. Boise going to be Boise. Ducks got to get real, period. Now, period. I like that sentiment. I totally agree with it. There's just whatever it is, man. And just for having 3 games, there's a lot more bad blood there than just a normal non-conference game.
Absolutely. I'll give you one more from Eric Hovland at Eric J. Hovland, one of our loyal listeners and followers. It wasn't as bad as many believed, but still lots of potential to improve. I couldn't agree more, especially on the potential to improve aspect.
Hey man, and I agree, and I love all the engagement we've been getting. This is we've gotten the big upgrade in the Big Ten, moving to the big conference. We're getting the big social media engagement now. So thank you guys. Make sure you're following Once a Duck on all the relevant social medias, and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you're there for all our videos and maybe some of the shorts that we have coming to let you guys know that maybe can't sit through an entire podcast and listen to every word we have to say. Just some clips there, some highlights, some fun things for our fans.
Well, folks, we'll always be sure to get out the social media posts, whether it's promoting our episodes, giving you clips from our interviews. There's always a lot you can search for. Before we get out of here, Nick, tell them where they can find you personally on social media. Where can people follow Nick Cody?
Yeah, absolutely. All the relevant socials on Instagram, Threads, X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I am at Nick R. Cody.
Folks, I am at Samuel101TS. Before we get out of here, Nick, any last thoughts, anything you need to leave the Oregon fans with ahead of this Boise State matchup?
Yeah, I'm just hoping for a good, clean game with no sucker punches at the end. I think it's easy to say. No, honestly, man, wish I could be there in Autzen with y'all. It's going to be an awesome time. I have a lot of faith in this team and our leadership from the coaching staff on down to the players that they're going to do what it takes to have this be a teachable moment and not one that we look back on and go, yeah, we should have seen the signs. I really do believe that, and I hope the rest of our fan base is right there in believing in and supporting our team on Saturday.
Nick, I couldn't agree with you more. Folks, I'll be there on Saturday. If you see me, be sure to say what's up. Give it a go, Ducks. I can't wait to hopefully see all of you down there in Autzen as well. Until next time, I've been Sam Schmidt. That's been Nick Cody. Nick, give him the words and let's get out of here.
Special thanks to Mark Asper, and as always, once a Duck, always a Duck.